This video is a sequel to an earlier video I made a few weeks ago, trying to get to the bottom of why Hulk Hogan is regarded so lowly in comparison to other wrestling legends by his peers. Out of those wrestlers who have worked with Hogan at every stage of his career, it was really easy for me to find bad words against him rather than good. I said at the end of the original video that I could have gone on and on. After 20 minutes I'd barely scratched the surface, and then the comments came from you guys and that you really wanted me to do a sequel to that video and do a bit more digging. So in the first video we established from a host of Hogan's peers the running themes in their complaints. We saw that he was lying and self-serving, even racist. In this video, we'll look at some of the lies Hogan has told over the years and the greed that he's espoused for decades. Let's start with a real American legend in Elvis Presley. Elvis sang about his blue suede shoes, his burning love and his lonesome heart, but he never sang about his fandom for the Hulkster. That's likely because he wasn't a fan of the Hulkster. Don't ask Terry though, because if you take his WWE sanctioned autobiography as gospel, then he believes the opposite. In the book, Hogan writes that the King of Rock and Roll would take time out of his busy schedule to come and watch him wrestle. This was while Hogan was working in Memphis. That was a couple of years before he started with WWE. It's a claim that you would expect could not be verified one way or the other, considering that Elvis is dead, apart from the fact that Hogan was wrestling in Memphis in 1979, which was a full 2 years after Elvis died of a heart attack while on the toilet. Well, maybe music fan Hogan was just misremembering. I wonder if he was also misremembering when he made the claim that he was almost Cliff Burton's replacement in the band Metallica. Metallica bassist Cliff Burton tragically died at the age of 24 in a bus accident. Hogan has repeatedly claimed that he auditioned as his replacement, but it never worked out. Again, it might have been difficult to prove either way, apart from the fact that Metallica co-founder Lars Ulrich says he has never even been in the same room as Hogan, let alone auditioned him for his band. Hogan helped draw a huge number of fans to WrestleMania 3. If Wikipedia is to be believed, then the attendance for that show was a whopping 93,173. SummerSlam in 1992 was a big deal as well. It took place at Wembley Stadium in London, and WWE claims there were over 80,000 fans on hand that evening. In his autobiography, Hogan talks about how he met an ill Hulkamaniac at the show and he ensured that the fan got a front row seat so he could watch him headline that night in London. What a nice thing for Hogan to do. Only problem is, it's utter bullcrap. Hogan wasn't on SummerSlam 1992. In fact, he wasn't even working at the time. Hogan was on leave from WWE due to his involvement in the steroid scandal. Do you remember WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans when Hogan came out and kept saying he was at the Silverdome rather than the Superdome? I remember because I was there live and I almost fell off my seat laughing as the crowd booed him. It was a classic mistake by racist Grandpa Hogan. Luckily, The Rock and Steve Austin were on hand to save the day, a moment that Hogan later claimed was completely impromptu and unexpected. Hogan apparently didn't even know the other two legends were in the building. It would be a WWE Network documentary that ratted him out, as Hogan, The Rock and Austin are all shown meeting backstage before the show, exchanging pleasantries. Here's a double helping of bullshit from that iconic match between The Rock and Hogan at WrestleMania 18. Now, obviously I'm no Hogan fan, but if I was forced to pick a moment I was genuinely in awe of Old Man Terry, it would be this icon versus icon match. It was, without irony, something special to behold. Shame that Hogan had to crap on it by lying. Hogan could be seen clutching his ribs after the match, presumably selling the arduous contest like any properly trained wrestler should. Hogan later claimed that it wasn't a sell, however. He first said that The Rock broke his ribs during the match, and then he later revised that statement in an interview to say that Rikishi had broken his ribs before the match during a house show. Now, if it was true, that would make Hogan one tough son of a gun. I mean, it's not, obviously, but still. We shouldn't be overly surprised considering that Hogan has apparently got a lot of shoot fighting experience dating back to the 1970s. In a 2011 radio appearance, Hogan claimed to have battled Pride fighters back in Japan in 1977. He said that he never knew if he was getting into the ring with a shooter back in the day. Bearing in mind that Pride Fighting Championship started in 1997, not 1977, so Hogan was only 2 decades out with that particular lie. One of Hogan's lies that I think about quite often, mainly due to the amount of grilled cheese sandwiches that I eat, is that he was going to be the name and the face on the George Foreman grill. I actually believed this up until making this video, which makes me really gullible, made worse by the fact I've told other people that their grill would have been branded red and yellow if Hogan hadn't missed a phone call. On an episode of the absolutely mental reality show Hogan Knows Best, Hogan claimed that the makers of the grill wanted him to represent it, but at the time of the phone call he was out picking his kids up. The offer apparently immediately went to the next man on the list, which was George Foreman. It's hard to believe the manufacturer of the grill wouldn't have just called him back half an hour later rather than shrugging their shoulders and going, just get George on the phone instead. Ridiculous. All of these petty little lies just remind me of that one friend we all had at school that constantly made shit up to make themselves look more interesting. Jim Cornette certainly sees through Hogan's lies. No, he was never going to be Metallica, and no, he wasn't going to be the George Foreman grill, and no, he wasn't going to be the guy that worked twice every day for 400 days in a row because he was flying backwards in time from Japan and whatever the fuck else. And Muhammad Ali's daughter saved him from committing suicide, which was news to her when people thanked her for it. Yes, during a promotional tour for his book in 2009, Hogan said that he was so depressed after his divorce that he sat in the bathroom with a gun and a bottle of rum. According to Hogan, Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, called him at just the right time. He said, all of a sudden the phone rang and it was Layla. She said, hey, what's going on? You're on the set. You're all depressed. We're worried about you. You're going to be okay? She called with no agenda, just to say hi and check on me. It snapped me out of it. At that moment, I switched gears. I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. Her voice saved my life. It really did. Lying about Elvis and portable meat grills is one thing, but this is heavy stuff. Layla Ali later said, I did call him because we were hosting a show together and I did refer him to my church at the time. He ended up going to the church and really taking a liking to it, but he didn't tell me on the phone that he was about to do that, so I didn't know. When it comes to the Hulkster, there's one thing you can't discount, and that's his business acumen. He's a man who knows how to squeeze out an incredible deal when it comes to signing a wrestling contract, like the one he signed with WCW in the mid-90s. It was the second WCW contract that the Hulkster signed, and it is mind-boggling to think that anyone agreed to it. First, Hogan was paid a $2 million signing bonus. That was just a big thank you from WCW to Hogan for taking the time to pick up the pen and sign his signature. Next, Hogan demanded a clause where he was paid 25% of the ticket revenue made during any Nitro or Thunder event that he appeared on, with a minimum cut of $25,000. Plus, Hogan was paid $20,000 every single month for being associated with the NWO. I don't even know what that clause means or why it's included. Did he want that money to stay as a heel, as he was losing money on merch? Because I understand those NWO t-shirts sold really, really well. What I do enjoy about businessman Hogan is that he loves to run a bricks and mortar store as well. Who can forget, of course, Hulk Hogan's Pasta Mania, a pasta restaurant that launched in 1995. It barely lasted a year, which is probably for the best. It would never have survived his heel turn in 1996. And then there's Hogan's Beach Shop, which has lasted longer. Just be careful though, if you want a photo holding one of his championship belts, he's going to try and charge you $50 for the privilege. It appears that it's not just lies but also greed that motivates the Hulkster. Back in 2010, Hogan successfully sued Post Foods after the cereal company released a commercial with a character called Hulk Boulder. He might have had a point, he was once known as Terry Boulder after all. Smelling blood, Hogan then brought a lawsuit against car dealer Southland Imports over a commercial that warns car buyers of getting body slammed thanks to bad deals, and apparently ripping off Hogan's catchphrases, including the use of the word brother and referring to muscles as guns. Perhaps Hogan is just making up for the money he didn't make in comparison to Sylvester Stallone. Famously, Hogan starred opposite Stallone in Rocky III as the character Thunderlips. It's the film we can blame for giving Hogan a taste for Hollywood that would haunt us all for years after. Hogan and Stallone remained buddies thereafter, with Stallone inducting Hogan into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005. In an interview, the Honky Tonk Man said this, and here's another rumour, I'll break it here. I understand Hogan was extremely upset when he found out that Sylvester Stallone got 3 times as much money as him for Stallone to come and say 3 minutes worth of an introduction for Hulk Hogan at the Hall of Fame when Hogan got in, and Hogan was not a happy Hogan, brother. Speaking of movies, according to Hogan, he's a master at rewriting scripts too. In his first autobiography, Hogan claims that he and Vince McMahon were disgusted by the final screenplay for his movie vehicle No Holds Barred, and so they locked themselves in a Florida hotel room for 3 days straight and rewrote the entire thing. Strange thing then that neither man are credited as writers on the film's credits. Hogan would also go on to claim that he rewrote Mr. Nanny and Santa with Muscles as well. Hogan doesn't have a writing credit on either of those either. He blames the Writers Guild for that for some reason. After all this, I have to ask, why lie, Hulkster? Why? It's as if being one of the most iconic wrestlers in the world just isn't enough for Terry Bollea.